back here in our Books client app, we're going to start playing with some Angular components. First thing we're going to do is actually close these files. And then in our app directory, let's right click and add a new folder. And let's call it Display Books. In this folder, we're going to add a couple new files. The first one is not untitled. Will be display-books.component.ts. And then we're going to add a display books.component.html. And then we're also going to add a display books.component.css. All right. So now that we have this display books component, let's go ahead and start making it more like an actual component. So we're going to export class display books component. However, we're not quite done yet. We also need to import our component from Angular. So let's up top import component from at Angular core. And then let's give ourselves a bit more space here, and we're going to add a component decorator. And we're going to add at component, open up a set of parentheses and curly braces. And we're going to add selector app-display books. Tidy that up a bit. All right. So here we're setting up, you can think of the at component decorator as, it kind of tells Angular what to do with this file. It says, hey, this is a component. Right here we're saying our selector is going to be app display books, which if we go over and look at the index.html, we have this app-root. That's technically a selector as well. So here we would have a selector app-display books that will work for this component only. And now that we've created this component and we've kind of set up its basic structure, let's go ahead and actually add it to our app module.ts. So let's open that up. And then in the declarations section, let's add a comma after our app component. And let's add display books component. And we can see here the Visual Studio is already trying to help me out. If I hit tab, it'll finish off my import for me and actually import the whole thing and get my pathing right for me. So I'm going to save. And then I'm going to go try and plug it in. So I'm going to close app module. And I'm going to open up my app component.html. And let's take out everything here in this first div. And let's add app display books. I'll save that. But we're not quite done yet because display books doesn't have anything to render to the page yet. So in displaybooks.component.ts, in the @component decorator, after selector, let's add comma, template. Notice I'm going to use a set of backticks here because that will give me some template literal structure here. And I'm going to add an h1 tag and say this is display books component. I'll save there. Cool. Using this template right here will actually let us put HTML directly into our TS file. You can think of it as like the render in React when we use JSX, but here we can just use our backticks here and pass in whatever HTML we want. Note, if you have more than 3 lines of HTML, this gets really ugly and really confusing, so you'll want to use your display books component.html for that. But let's check it out. Let's see what we're doing now. So if I open it up, I see this is display books component. If we go back here, that is exactly what I have here in this template. So we can see that app display books is the name that we would use as our HTML element. And then this template here is what's actually going to be rendered to the page when we use display books component. So now let's modify this a little bit because we're going to want to add more HTML than just this. So instead of having template in the backticks, I'm going to cut that out and I'm going to add template URL colon, open up a set of strings, and then I'm going to link it to my display books.component.html. We can also add our styles link here. So let's go ahead and link up our CSS file. And we do that by setting our style URLs. And now this is really important. Styles URLs is an array. So we're going to open up our brackets, and our first value is going to be display books.component.css. Awesome. So let's save that. And then we'll go into our display books component.html, which should be empty. And we'll add an H1 that says books are cool. So let's save this. And now let's go check out our Angular app again. And we get this new title here. We get the actual content of that display books component.html. Alright, so now that we made a component the hard way, let's go ahead and make one the easy way. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my terminal. I'm going to hit this little plus sign button over here. Then I'm going to cd into my Angular. I'm going to cd into my client. Awesome. So if I run a dir, I see my package.json, which means I'm in the right place to start telling Angular, or the CLI of Angular, to start generating a new component for me. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to add ng generate component create book. That's going to spit out 4 brand new files for me: a create book component HTML, spec.ts, TS, and CSS file. And it's also going to update my app module.ts for me. Let's go take a peek at that real quick. So I can see my create book component has been imported, and it's also been added to my declarations for my ng module here, which is pretty cool. Angular just takes care of that for you whenever you generate a component via the CLI. So now, let's start making another one here. And now we're going to want a display books / pages. So we're going to want pages in our display books folder. To do that, I'm going to generate a new component, and I'm going to use an even more shorthand terminal command than we used before. I'll use ng, G for generate, C for component, and then I'm going to add display books, because I want my pages component to be nested within my display books. I'm going to add pages. So again, Angular is going to add some more files for me, and it's also going to put my pages component inside my display books. So let's close our terminals for now, and let's take a look at our new folder structure here. I have display books, within it is pages with all the folders and files, and I have a create book as well. And if I go ahead and open up my app module again, I've got create book and pages component, and they've both been added to my declarations array. So now, let's say we don't actually want pages. We maybe made a mistake. So let's just right click on pages, the folder. I'm going to delete it. Say yes, move it to my recycling bin. And then I'm going to go to my app module.ts, cut out my pages import. Notice it's already recognizing that I don't have it anymore. And I need to cut out my declaration right here for the pages component. So I'll chop that out and I'll save it. We'll pull up my terminal to see how Angular feels about it. And it was pretty mad for a second there, but now I see this compiled successfully. So I know that I have now successfully created and deleted a component. So now let's actually play with some of the new components we just made. I'm going to go ahead and close all of my folders or files. And I'm going to open up my create book component.ts file. And I've got my component decorator here with my selector, my template URL, styles URL, and I actually also have the basic setup for my my component here. Angular just builds all this out for me. It imports Angular core, sets up my class, gives me a constructor, and an ng on init. And that is basic components in Angular.